Hey, somebody needs to find the beginning. You have? Excellent. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. You are listening to The Professional Noticer. Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Andrews. Hey, thank you for making me a part of your week. My purpose here today and with every show we do is to play the part of a best friend or a coach. I want to help you live the life of your wildest dreams by giving you access to the greatest mentors the world has to offer today. Our sponsor this week is itam.org. That's IAITAM.org. ITAM. They're the only global member-based training organization dedicated to meeting the needs of IT asset management professionals. ITAM is the only global training organization turning out IT asset managers that corporations immediately hire all over the world. So check them out. How would you like to complete an accredited online program and get a degree that's actually in huge demand? Okay, so you're asking, in huge demand by whom? Well, just go to IAITAM.org and look through their client list. You'll see everyone from Sony Pictures to NASA to the United Nations. Google is one of ITAM's clients. Google, Yahoo, Facebook, Microsoft, Apple. These companies only hire the people that ITAM has trained because ITAM offers the only accredited degree in the field. That's ITAM.org. Well, observations and answers. That's what we do here on The Professional Noticer. And as you know, we love it when somebody comes to the table with both. We have a special guest today, a surprise from Louisiana. You know, it's hard for an Alabama fan to welcome somebody who's probably an LSU fan as happily as I want to. But this is a fellow author, a fellow speaker. She is a communicator, and she's the author of the new book, No Hamsters in Heaven: How to Stop Spinning Out of Control. What a great name for a book. Please welcome Beth Townsend. Hey, Beth.
Thank you. It is great to be here.
I appreciate you coming over. And let's just clear the air. Are you an LSU fan?
Okay, so my husband and my son are LSU graduates, but my brother-in-law has been employed gainfully by the University of Alabama since he graduated college.
Wow. So he's a very smart person.
He is a very smart person. He's written a lot of Alabama books, and he's done a lot of training, and we're safe. Wow. We're good to go.
But you got a foot in both camps there.
I do.
Man, thank you for being here. And this is a devotional. It's a weekly devotional.
It is.
And I got into it over the weekend and was just thrilled with it.
Good.
And so I'm curious as to how, because this is your second book, right?
Yes.
Okay. I want to ask you about your first book in a minute, but tell me, where did the title come from? No Hamsters in Heaven.
Well, I sat down with like a book expert, like a literary agent, and I was telling them my idea of this book. And I had written Life on Purpose. And then I decided to do Purpose as a Promise, because I think people need to know it's really true. God has a purpose and a plan for your life, right? So he said to me something so profound. I was so far along in the process, but he said, you can't do Purpose. That is owned by other famous authors, and you need a different, your own kind of thing. So I was like, well, that's probably a great idea. And it is an overused topic, but it's a great one because people love it. So I went back home and I thought, what am I going to do? And as normal, when I'm out running and I'm hot, and of course the Louisiana heat, I was like, hamsters. There's no hamsters in heaven. And I come back home and I always tell my husband, I'm like, I have this idea. And he's always like, oh dear, let me sit down. So I said, there's no hamsters in heaven. How to stop spinning out of control. Because it's really, when you think about people in purpose, they're spinning, trying so hard to find it.
Sure.
That they're...
And we know all dogs go to heaven, and we already knew there's no cats in heaven, but now no hamsters either.
And you'll be surprised how many people are like, my hamster's in heaven.
My hamster's in heaven. Oh my gosh. But what a great metaphor for a life spinning out of control, because I mean, how many times we said, it's like a hamster in a cage, hamster in a wheel. So what a great metaphor.
Well, and as I became a life coach, and one of the things they taught us in that was that, people have open and closed loops. So all day, you have things up here that you haven't accomplished yet. And they sit up on your shoulders and they're like, to do, beep, 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 like little alerts. And I thought, well, that's an open loop. So the idea behind the book is if you want less open loops, then you have to commit to less things that don't really matter in the big scheme of things. So it became a hamster wheel.
I think that is, I think that is just, because I think your literary agent was right. I think that if you're going to write a book on purpose, you got to have a different, just a different entryway.
Yeah.
Because your agent was right. There are a lot of books on purpose, and to crack that room with the purpose-driven life and all these, to crack that room will be tough. But to be able to come in the back door, because a famous songwriter, a guy named Jimmy Yeary, told me one time. He said, everything has been said. Everything's been said. He said, we just got to figure out a different way to say it. And so I find that true in my writing. And I find that true in raising kids, just trying to, how can I explain this in a different way? How can I explain the same thing in another way? How can I hit this in a way that maybe it hits you now rather than going right over your head? And so what, your first book, though, was Life on Purpose.
It is Life on Purpose. And so I grew up, I was out on my own at 17. The day I graduated high school, I was completely on my own. Car, house, food, you name it. So I went to work. I tried college. They came and told me no one was paying my bill. My dad was on his 9th wife by then. It's not a joke. It's a reality.
Really?
Yeah.
No exaggeration?
No. Well, there's some, we all wonder kind of, was there more, was there less? But we know of 9.
We know of 9. Okay.
So, but when I went to work, I went with no skills. At least, I was young. I entered into the work field at a young age. And so.
You entered with no technical skills.
Technical skills. But I was hungry and I knew I had to make it work.
And you could get along with people and you could smile.
I could smile, which, yes, absolutely. And so I went to work and I began to climb the corporate ladder because, somewhere in that first few years, I started to realize some skills, some of which are the same ones that you teach people, not to complain. I was so grateful for work. I was never going to go to work and complain because if I didn't have that job, I didn't have a house, whatever. It was like I didn't have a plan B. So I became a corporate trainer and I began teaching seminars. And I was in my 20s and people would ask me, how did you know your purpose? And I'm like, my purpose is just to pay the bills,
The bills, yeah.
And I had I grew up with a real warped sense of theology, but it made me realize that purpose is a deeper question. It's just not what you do. And I started interviewing people. In 2001, I started sending notes across, like you did. You sent notes, people sent you letters back. I started sending notes to people saying, how did you know your purpose? But I went to them. I went to all of them. And began to interview people. And that's what the first book is about. It's the purpose principles that I learned from people that I interviewed. And then the second book really is more about identity. And if you know who you are, I like to say we're not human doings, we're human beings for a reason. Because if we know how to be who we are, then we'll always know what to do. Make sense?
Yeah. We're not human doings, we're human beings. I like that. I also ran across something I want you to unpack for us, and that is know and name your knots.
Yes. So that is one of my favorite life principles. So when I was in that corporate boardroom that first time, and mind you, I had just moved to Atlanta. In my mind, I'm like, early 20s, I'd hit the big time. I'm in a big office. It's all beautiful. And I'm surrounded by all these people with these degrees. They have all this education on me. They have age on me. And here I sit and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to earn this seat. I'm not going to get kicked out of it. I'm not going to, I'm just going to sit here and learn. So I was quiet. I was quiet for the first year. But when I sat in that first meeting, one of those first meetings that I was invited to, the boss had not come in. There's probably 25 people around the table. And boy, did they moan and complain, this policy, that procedure, this. And again, I'm sitting there going, yeah, but I need this job. I'm not going to complain to anybody because this is my stepping stone to something bigger and better. So I decided literally that I'll never become that. I'll never become a complainer. I'll never become someone who doesn't talk about what's wrong. I'll just go to the person who can help, and I'll have a great work ethic. So that was the day that I committed literally to myself. That's what I'll not become. And
you're not going to be. You knew that day you knew and named your nots.
That was my first knot. And what happens when you know and you name your knot, you have to hold yourself accountable. Because if you write in a book, I'm not a complainer, and you catch yourself complaining, you're like, uh-oh.
Or worse, somebody who read your book catches you complaining.
Exactly. So since that time, I have found the power of being able to, you talk a lot in the book you just signed for me, The 7 Habits, about comparison. If I get on social media and compare myself with everybody who's written books and gets speaking engagements and stuff like that.
It's depressing, isn't it?
I'm just going to stay home. I'm just going to go be a Walmart greeter and I'm not going to leave. But if I don't do that, and if I have the discipline to say, okay, what can I learn from them? Then I can say, okay, for instance, Beth Moore used to intimidate me because she knew the Bible. And I thought, what? I was like, oh, and one day it hit me. I'm not Beth Moore. Ooh, I don't have to become Beth Moore. I don't have to pretend I'm Beth Moore. And I don't have to go anywhere and feel threatened because someone else knows the whole Bible. I can go tell stories. I can just be Beth. And so that's kind of the know and name nots. You have to, you can't just say, I'm not this person. You have to name it so then you're completely free of it forevermore, because once you've said no, then, it's gone.
This little 3 minutes here has been worth your visit to me. That's such a critical thing for most people, including me. I had lunch with a very, very good friend this past weekend, and he is an incredibly famous speaker, and he's done 10 times what I've done. And he mentioned to me, he said, yeah, I get a little discouraged when I see what other people have done. And I'm like, you? Really?
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. I hadn't got a chance then. But it's true. I mean, when you said the day you realized I'm not Beth Moore. I don't have to know the whole Bible because I'm not Beth Moore.
Exactly.
I mean,
And that's a hamster wheel. So because of social media and the influx of news and things like that, then you tend to you start seeing what other people are doing, and then you begin to feel less you because you're trying to be more them, right. And then you lose yourself in the process.
There's such a huge challenge with mental health these days, and especially in young people. And I think it's agreed upon that social media is a part of that. Mm-hmm. But I don't think anybody goes to the bottom of the pool about it. I think people go, oh, yeah, well, social media is part of it. And people, yeah, that's true. But nobody says, okay, but why is it? Mm-hmm. Why is it? And I think a real reason is that unconscious comparison. Mm-hmm. And I think what we have to realize is when we're looking at people's lives on social media, that's not reality. We only know our reality. We only know that we overslept and we stressed out and that we don't feel real good today. And we had an argument with our spouse, and, the neighbor's doing something, and, and it's like, we're having to watch the finances, and that's all we know. But when you read when you're posting social media, you don't say you feel bad. You don't say you're struggling with finances. You don't say you had an argument with your spouse. You're just putting the good stuff on there. Well, so are they.
Right.
And so here we're comparing our reality with what is not reality in every other case.
Right, right. Which is why it's so important to read the backstories of the people that are your mentors. Like, to know you lived under a bridge helps me to know, okay, he got rejected too. So you can't just fast forward and see what you see. You've got to, okay, if I'm going to follow this person, if I'm going to let this person in my headspace, then I need to know more about them. And I need to do the query behind it. What is
Boy,
it called?
that is so true.
And so don't follow someone or let them influence you until they've all faced horrific things, not maybe, troubles, overcome trials, things like that. You have to know what they overcame to get there. And most people just jump.
I think that's why biographies are so important.
Yes.
Because the jury is in on those lives. And you can read every bad turn, every bad decision, every mistake, every, bad luck. You can read it all, and you can see how they responded, and you can either say, I'm not going to do that, or,
right.
Well, that's how I'm going to respond. So,
yeah.
Biographies, I think, are a great
Well, and also key conversations. I still remember years ago, I was just a young mom, and I was at a mom's group where our kids were playing, and we went off, and I had a girl tell me, she says, I just really don't like you. I said, well, why not? She said, well, you just think you got it all together, don't you? You're just happy all the time. You wear cute clothes, and you try to keep in decent shape. And she said, I just don't like that about you because you think you got it all together. I said, well, maybe we should have coffee. And so we had coffee, and she's like, I really like you now. Now I understand. But it was a wake-up call for me too, because we do have to be vulnerable. In my first book, I was very vulnerable, and I'm pretty vulnerable in this one too. But in my first book, I shared most of my story, and it was tough. And I've had a lot of people come to me and say, my family was a mess too. And I'm like, yeah, but what are you going to do with that?
Right.
You've got to do something with that.
It's funny to me, people will say to me sometimes, they'll say, our family is a mess, like they're telling me some secret or telling me something that I would have never suspected. But I always say, really? Your family's a mess? Well, join the club. Family Feud has been on the air for 25 years, and they have yet to get 5 people from one family that are all normal. There's always some bozo in there.
Right.
And so everybody's family's kind of messed up.
Yeah.
So what does it mean to have a bold identity?
So it means knowing who you are, and again, knowing who you're not, but being willing to walk through the tough parts of life. I'll give you a great example. I went to counseling one time. I was raised by a single mom. She raised 5 kids. And we had a lot of problems going. Just telling you my dad had 9 wives tells you enough.
Great.
You don't really need a lot of details.
That's all we need to know.
So fast forward, my mom is our hero, right? But I'm in counseling because I don't want to dump all my crazy stuff on my kids. So I go to counseling, and I'm like, I need counseling. I want to know what I need to know, right? So I go to counseling, and she asked me a question, and it's forever been a turning point for me. She said, do you want to have a life built on real relationships or fake ones? And I knew it was a trick question, but I'm sitting there, I'm going, okay, real relationships. And she said, you're going to have to talk to your mom. I was like, my mom? So we fast forward. I wrestle with her. I'm like, no, she's the idol of our family, right? She did we had food on our table because she worked, all these things. But, during my high school years, she was away, married, 3rd marriage. So I was left home alone. Some really bad things happened. Some were self-imposed, some not so much. So what she said was, you're going to have to talk to your mom because she left you. I said, well, I can't do that. She says, okay, you're just going to have fake relationships for the rest of your life. And I'm like, okay, no. So I called my mom. Now, she walked me through it, how to have that conversation. She was very careful. And I said, Mom, I'm going through some counseling, right? You know that. And she says, yes, honey, I do. How's that going? I said, well, I need to talk to you about something. She says, okay, what? So in about 5 minutes, we had that conversation. And she said, I'm so sorry, honey. I did. I chose David over you. And I'm so sorry. I left you. And I said, well, okay, then we're good to go. And so in that 5 minutes, I stood up for me. And I think if you're not willing to see the value of yourself and answer those tough questions and stand up to my mom or my boss or someone else, then every time I don't, I wimp out. But every time I do, I step up. And that's getting off the hamster wheel.
A lot seem to be multiple ways of spinning.
There are. And a big part of it, it's like last night, it's night times when a lot of people are spinning and spinning. And last night I woke up, I have what I like to call hamster head. I'm like, oh no. So I started thinking about all these things and I'm like, I got a hamster head. I think to some degree it's normal to spin.
Sure.
We're busy. We're active people. We got a lot of things going on. But for me, if I have too many things up here, I'm not productive. So I have to be willing to pull those things down and say, okay, put it on a list, either let it go or say I'm going to get it done and then get it done. So I think spinning is not the problem. Accepting that as a way of life is crippling, and it's the real problem.
In writing books, which you and I have both done, there has to be a choice of, okay, I'm going to get started writing. I'm going to get started on this. And I feel like that part of that choice, or part of the thing that I have to overcome every time before I start writing is, do I just feel strongly about this? Do I just kind of know? Do I just feel like somebody ought to be told this? Or do I feel like I have something that I've experienced, that I've thought about enough, that I can explain enough, that I need to write this because other people would need to read it? How did you get to that point? How did you get to that point with No Hamsters in Heaven? Because it's a weekly devotional, and there's a lot in here. And so I know what it's like to start something because you have an idea and then feel like, I don't know enough to write a book on this. I don't know enough. I can't have, half the book be filler or half the book be repetitive. And so when did you know you were ready to write this? Because this is one more point. People don't understand. I've heard people say, how much is this book?
$12.99.
I've heard people say, $12.99 for a book? And I want to say, no, $12.99 for years
Yes.
of this lady's life.
Exactly.
I mean, you get to go through it pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. You can learn in several hours what it's taken her years to understand. Mm-hmm. And so at what point did you realize, hey, I'm ready to do this?
Well, because I did everything backwards because of being on my own so early. When I was that corporate trainer, I was traveling. So when I had babies, I decided I'm going to stay home because my poor mama had to work, 2 jobs. And I thought, I'm going to do my best to stay home with my kids and work part-time. And that's when I thought, well, I'm just going to write a book, no big deal, right? And to me, it's what speakers did. And I spent 20 years getting rejected on that book.
Well, a lot of speakers do write books because speakers write books.
Exactly. But until you sit down and write it. So that first book to me was therapeutic because I had to put principles on paper that really can change a life. And then after that, I thought, well, gosh, I told everybody about purpose, but it's really not about purpose. It's about identity. And I have this phrase I like to use, and it's called better me, better we. Because, you sit at church and you listen to a sermon and you're I hope my husband hears that. I'm going to send this to my kids. But better me has to start. It has to be the what leads to better we. So for me, I find that I believe that it's a sense of identity, a sense of self, a sense of who is Beth. Because when God put me in my mother's womb, it was just me. There was no husband, there were no children, there were no sisters, there was none of that. It was just me. So, okay, who is that me? And most people cannot answer that question. So to me, that book is about, you got to answer that question. Who are you and what's your name? And then the better me, if I'm a really great wife and I'm a really great person and I'll walk into the world carrying that person, my husband can't not be affected by that. My kids can't not see that. So it's really more about, okay, if I'm my best me, that's really going to dictate a lot of those other relationships.
You've interviewed a lot of people. Tell me of a time that you interviewed somebody that they answered in a way that surprised you.
I would say pretty much everyone. The interview that I think will go down. So my brother-in-law, who is University of Alabama.
I mean, I'll just tell you now. When Ted Nugent told me that he didn't drink and he had never done drugs, that surprised me. Okay, go ahead.
I bet.
So your brother-in-law is
my
University of
brother-in-law,
Alabama.
who we have nothing in common. He talks sports. He and my husband talk sports. I know nothing. So when he comes in, I cook. I mean, we have fun. We do the things and, all that. But when he hears I'm writing a book, he says, I'm going to tell you your best interview. He's not even a Christian, right? He says his name is John Croyle. You know John Croyle?
Yeah.
Okay. So I said, no kidding. So the fact that Steve is A, talking to me, and B, telling me someone I've got to have in my book, I'm like, I am taking notes. So he sets it up. So I'm sitting there. I go to Alabama. I'm sitting there with John Croyle, who played for University of Alabama. I'm sitting across a table like this with him, and I'm all prepared. I've got all my notes about him. I know more about John Croyle than John Croyle that day, right? So he looks at me, and he says, give me that stuff. And my notes, all my things, my sense of security right here. He said, just give me all that stuff. And I was like, I've completely lost control of this interview. What am I going to do now? I'm thinking. And so he holds that stuff and he says, I know you. I recognize you. I said, yeah. He says, I want you to know something. Peaks and valleys. Peaks and valleys. He said, you're a jumper and you want to jump peak to peak because you're that personality and so was I. He said, but I want you, when you go in the valley, I want you to sit there and I want you to learn and I want you to remember that's where God's going to teach you the most. So when I'm in a valley, I hear John Croyle saying, God's got you there for a reason.
Wow. John Croyle, Big Oak Boys and Girls Ranch.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So he is a great person. He and T have changed a lot of lives.
They have. And he really did. God sent me, all the people that I went to, I felt like God sent me to, because from all of them, I learned a life-changing principle. But for him, it was more like he looked in my soul and he was like, just give me a minute.
Right.
And then he took the minute. And then he handed me all my stuff back and says, okay, where were we? I was like, oh, that was fun. So, yeah. And, I think when I think back on, I did an interview talking about dreams come true. My husband's a big Braves fan. And so therefore I am too, because we lived in Atlanta for a long time. I did an interview with Jeff Francoeur.
Wow.
And so this was back when he was playing, he was the face of the franchise. But his dream came true in a short amount of time. And I say that because he didn't deviate. He didn't go off on a wild. He didn't go crazy. He didn't go to college and have a wild. He became Jeff Francoeur, and I'm sure he had some mistakes along the way. But, your dreams are more within reach if you stay on the path that is carefully planned and you don't go down off these crazy roads. And I did a lot of crazy things. A lot of crazy things happened. But I think of dreams coming true in a short amount of time, and that's very rarely happens. But for people like him, I was like, yeah, he kept his life clean because he wanted to walk that out, and he did. I'm sure he had parents that were helping him walk that. And now look at him; he's the face of the franchise still, as a father, but now he's a commentator and he does the color analysis. And still to this day, I look at him and I think, he walked the straight and narrow. There's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
How can we help you? Other than pushing your book, we're glad to do that. No Hamsters in Heaven.
Yep.
How to Stop Spinning Out of Control. Beth Townsend. Where's the best place for people to get this?
BethTownsend.com. It's Amazon. My first book is there too.
Where do you want us to get this?
BethTownsend.com.
BethTownsend.com. So let's do BethTownsend.com. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll have all how to contact you and your social media and everything on the show notes. And,
thank you.
And so we appreciate it. And you signed our writer's block, and so people can come see that in the studio. People ask, they say, do you have a problem with writer's block? And I say, no, because I keep mine under glass out in the studio. We know where it is at all time.
That's right.
So anyway, thank you, Beth.
Thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate it. I'm Andy Andrews, the professional noticer, harnessing common sense and wisdom to plow through challenges all the way to an answer for you. And I think that'll do it for this week. Get us out of here, Matthew. So, ladies and gentlemen, and to the boys and girls who aspire to become ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of another episode of The Professional Noticer. In a world where common sense has become a superpower, I'm harnessing that tiny bit of mental energy I have for you, seeking wisdom, making observations, and endeavoring to answer tough questions in a way that will empower your family and your business. I'm Andy Andrews. Until next week, goodbye. This episode of The Professional Noticer was produced by Matt Limpert. The Noticer theme written and performed by Sugarcane Jane. Photographic enlargements for the cast and crew provided by Twinkle and Smoke of Beverly Hills. Additional financial consideration provided by the Chihuahua. Friends, how many times have you suddenly needed to cut a limb from a tree, but just didn't have the tool necessary? Traditional wood cutting equipment is heavy, bulky, and dangerous to operate. Now there's an answer to your problem. Introducing the world's first pocket chainsaw, the Chihuahua. The Chihuahua is not a toy, but a fully powered gas-operated chainsaw capable of taking even the largest of trees and gnawing them to stumps in minutes. Best of all, the Chihuahua will fit in the front pocket of your blue jeans where it can rest quietly until it's time to snarl into action. Order your Chihuahua today. It's a mean little machine.